Imagine this. It's late. The noise of the day has finally faded. No meetings, no messages, no tasks left on the to-do list. You're alone in your room. The lights are dim. Your phone is face down. There's nothing demanding your attention. And yet, you feel it. A subtle restlessness. A weight in your chest. A pressure in your throat. You can't name it, but it's there. Persistent. Unsettling. So you reach for something. Your phone, your playlist, a podcast, an email, a snack. Anything. Anything but this. Because even in this brief moment of silence, something inside starts to echo. Not loudly, not violently, but like a whisper that grows with every second you try to ignore it. And you realize, maybe not for the first time, that being still feels more dangerous than taking risks. That sitting in silence feels more unbearable than any external failure. That facing yourself without distraction is somehow more terrifying than rejection, judgment, or even pain. So you keep moving. You keep doing. You chase one goal after the next. You fear slowing down, not because there's something wrong out there, but because of what you might feel in here. What are you running from? And more importantly, why does stillness feel so unsafe? We praise productivity. We glorify the grind. We admire those who never stop. But behind the motivational quotes and the morning routines, a darker truth lingers. Movement has become our escape. We're not just afraid of failure. We're afraid of what happens when there's nothing left to chase. Because that's when the questions come. The real ones. The ones we bury under ambition and achievement. What if I don't know who I am without my goals? What if I've been performing success and calling it purpose? What if I'm terrified to meet the parts of myself I've ignored? In stillness, there are no masks to hide behind. No applause to validate us. No excuses to numb us. Just us. And the quiet roar of everything we haven't resolved. That's the paradox, isn't it? We are more comfortable failing in motion than being still in truth. We would rather burn out than sit with discomfort. We would rather chase approval than explore identity. We would rather do something meaningless than face meaninglessness head-on. But what if this isn't weakness? What if this fear of stillness is not just a personal flaw, but a collective wound? What if our aversion to silence is actually a symptom of something deeper? Something rooted in the way we were raised, conditioned, and programmed to distrust ourselves in stillness. Because stillness strips away the noise. And when the noise disappears, the mirror appears. And not everyone is ready to look. So we keep moving. We keep building. We keep breaking ourselves to avoid what stillness reveals. But what if stillness isn't the enemy? What if it's the one place where truth finally speaks, and we've just forgotten how to listen? What would we discover if we stopped running? What parts of ourselves would we meet in that silence? And what power might we reclaim once we no longer fear it? Let's find out. Let's unearth the roots of this modern fear, the fear of stillness, and the price we pay for constantly escaping it. Because the answers we seek aren't out there. They're waiting in the quiet. Stillness was never the danger. But somewhere along the way, we were taught that it was. From childhood, stillness was often confused with laziness, quiet with disobedience, idleness with irresponsibility. If you weren't moving, doing, producing, you were falling behind, wasting time, failing. So we learned to equate motion with meaning. We learned to chase activity as a proxy for identity. We built our sense of worth on output, not inner alignment. But here's the hidden wound. In all that doing, we never learned how to be. And without the ability to be, stillness becomes unbearable. Jung, the shadow of the unlived self. Carl Jung believed that every human being has a shadow, a part of ourselves we repress, ignore, or exile to remain acceptable to society. Stillness invites the shadow back into the room. In silence, there's nowhere to hide from the parts of yourself you've kept at a distance. Your regrets, your unmet needs, your repressed desires, your unlived lives. When you're busy, these parts stay quiet. But when you're still, they speak. And they don't whisper politely. They ask things like, "Why did you abandon that dream? Why do you wear a mask that doesn't fit? Why do you feel so far from yourself and pretend that you're not?" Stillness becomes threatening not because it is empty, but because it is full of everything you've refused to feel. Nietzsche, The Terror of the Abyss. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that when you gaze long into the abyss gazes back into you. Stillness is that abyss. It is the space in which we are forced to reckon with the fundamental questions of existence. Who am I really, apart from what I do? What gives my life meaning, if not achievement? Is my busyness a defense against confronting my own insignificance? These are not questions the ego enjoys answering. The ego survives by narrative. It needs identity, control, trajectory. But stillness dissolves all of that. Stillness reminds us that we are fragile, mortal, alone, and that no amount of success will spare us from those truths. And so we flee. Not from stillness itself, but from the existential mirror it holds. Schopenhauer, The Pain Beneath the Chase. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that life is driven by a blind, insatiable will, a restless striving that can never be satisfied. And that restlessness is precisely what stillness interrupts. Stillness is not just the absence of movement. It is the moment we step off the treadmill of wanting, status, attention, escape, approval, and realize we don't know what to do with ourselves outside of that chase. And that realization, it terrifies us. Because when there's no next thing to grasp at, we're left with a question most of us can't answer. Who am I without the pursuit? Sartre, Freedom and the Weight of Consciousness. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist, wrote that we are condemned to be free. That freedom is not liberation, but burden. The realization that no one else can define us and that we must invent our lives moment by moment. Stillness confronts us with that freedom. It strips away distraction and reveals the raw truth that you are responsible for your life. No more blaming the schedule. No more outsourcing your purpose. No more hiding behind busyness. Stillness returns the weight of consciousness back to your hands, and with it, the uncomfortable truth. You've been free all along. You've just been afraid to act like it. The cultural illusion of constant motion. Modern society is built on the illusion that motion equals progress, but motion without direction is just drifting, and motion without reflection is just avoidance. We are surrounded by noise, algorithmic noise, ideological noise, internal noise, so much so that silence has become almost unnatural. Our nervous systems are wired for urgency. Our attention is fragmented. Our minds are conditioned to fear any gap in stimulation. But here's the truth. Stillness isn't uncomfortable because it's empty. It's uncomfortable because it's honest. And that honesty threatens everything we've used to define ourselves. Titles: Productivity, Performance, Praise. When we strip that away, we're left with something radical, just you, and whatever truth remains in the quiet. So we resist it, not because we hate stillness, but because we fear what it will reveal. We fear what we'll feel. We fear who we'll meet when there's nowhere left to run. But the cost of that resistance is higher than we realize. Let's explore what happens, not just internally but culturally, when stillness is feared and motion becomes an addiction. Because when a society runs from silence, it loses something far more precious than time. It loses truth. You might think the cost of avoiding stillness is minor. A little stress here, a little overwork there. But it's far more insidious than that. When we chronically avoid stillness, we sever our relationship with truth. And in its place, we build illusions, constructs of movement, performance, and identity that numb us from what stillness would reveal. This disconnection doesn't scream, it whispers. It corrodes slowly, but its consequences, they touch everything. Emotional avoidance becomes identity confusion. When you never slow down long enough to examine who you really are, your identity becomes a patchwork of roles, expectations, and borrowed goals. You build a life based on what others admire, not on what actually nourishes you. Stillness would expose this. Stillness would ask, is this really yours? But instead, we keep moving, and over time, we lose the ability to distinguish between who we are and who we've been pretending to be. That's how people end up with impressive lives that feel hollow. That's how ambition becomes a form of amnesia. Anxiety. Without a name. Stillness allows the nervous system to regulate, but in a world where we avoid it, our bodies never get the signal that it's safe to rest. This creates a baseline state of hypervigilance, a kind of background anxiety that follows us everywhere. Not because something is wrong, but because the body has forgotten how to be still without being afraid. You wake up tired. You overanalyze everything. You can't enjoy success because the next task is already looming. And worst of all, you don't even know why you feel so anxious. That's what happens when stillness becomes unfamiliar. Your entire system forgets what peace feels like and starts interpreting it as danger. Depth becomes intolerable. In the absence of stillness, depth becomes rare. Conversations stay surface level, relationships stay transactional, art becomes content, and silence, rather than being a sacred pause, becomes an awkward gap we rush to fill. We lose our tolerance for depth, for slowness, for the kind of inner work that can't be monetized, optimized, or streamed. Eventually, we start calling depth boring and distraction fun. But something inside us knows. It knows that scrolling isn't joy. It knows that multitasking isn't presence. It knows that silence isn't empty. It's just untranslated. The culture of perpetual performance. Avoidance of stillness doesn't just affect individuals. It reshapes entire cultures. We begin to reward burnout, celebrate overcommitment, normalize 24/7 availability, and treat rest like a guilty indulgence instead of a biological and spiritual necessity. Our institutions, schools, workplaces, media reinforce this. Children are taught to be productive before they're taught to be present. Employees are evaluated on output, not inner alignment. Even self-care is co-opted into a productivity hack. In a world allergic to stillness, performing becomes surviving. And beneath all the movement, people silently wonder, does anyone actually see me when I'm not doing something? Inner wisdom is muted. Stillness is where intuition lives. It's where the deeper voice inside you speaks, not the one shaped by conditioning, but the one born of knowing. The one that whispers, this isn't right for you. You need to grieve this. There's something more. But when we avoid stillness, that voice goes unheard. And over time, we stop consulting it. We start making decisions based on logic, fear, and imitation. That's how people stay in the wrong careers for decades. That's how relationships rot under polite silence. That's how dreams die quietly in well-lit rooms. Not because people are lazy, because they lost the silence that would have told them the truth. We mistake momentum for meaning. When motion becomes constant, it begins to feel like purpose. You confuse exhaustion for value. You equate busyness with progress. You wear your inability to rest like a badge of honor. And slowly, you lose the distinction between being in motion and being alive. You may have a full calendar, but an empty soul, a beautiful home, but no inner home, a social circle, but no one who truly sees you. That's the cost of fearing stillness, not burnout, disconnection, from yourself, from others, from the deeper questions that make life worth living. But here's the paradox. The longer we avoid stillness, the louder the call becomes. The more we run from silence, the more desperate our souls become to be heard. And eventually, something gives. A breakdown, a panic attack, a moment of overwhelming dread in a quiet room. But what if we didn't have to wait for the collapse? What if we could begin to reclaim stillness, not as threat, but as medicine? What if stillness wasn't the end of momentum, but the beginning of meaning? Let's find out. Let's talk about how to break free from the tyranny of constant motion and rediscover the quiet power that stillness holds. The rebellion doesn't begin with force. It begins with a pause, a breath, a question, a radical refusal to keep running from yourself. You don't need to blow up your life. You don't need to escape to the mountains or erase your past. The rebellion begins the moment you say, "I will not fear stillness anymore." Because stillness is not the absence of life. It is the gateway to it. Step 1. Redefine what stillness means. We've been programmed to associate stillness with failure, emptiness, stagnation. But stillness is not nothingness. Stillness is where integration happens. It's where your body catches up with your choices, where your soul gets a voice again, where your feelings stop being background noise and start becoming messages. Begin by reframing silence not as a threat, but as a sanctuary, a sacred space where something deeper begins to emerge, something more honest than performance, more enduring than progress. Step 2. Create micro-sanctuaries of quiet rebellion doesn't mean abandoning your responsibilities. It means creating pockets of stillness where your mind can rest and your truth can rise. Start with 5 minutes a day. No phone, no agenda. Just breathe. Walk slowly without headphones and listen, not just to the world but to the thoughts beneath the surface. Sit in a room and stare at nothing. Not to be productive, not to meditate right, just to be. You may feel anxious at first. That's not failure. That's your nervous system detoxing from overstimulation. Stay with it, because stillness doesn't reward you immediately. It reveals you slowly. Step 3. Disrupt the cult of constant motion. Every time you rest, reflect, or disconnect from the rush, you are confronting a system that benefits from your exhaustion. You weren't taught to be still because still people don't buy as much. Still people ask better questions. Still people don't follow trends. They create meaning. And that threatens the machinery of mass distraction. Your rebellion, then, is a refusal to participate. It's choosing depth over dopamine, presence over performance, awareness over achievement. You begin to see that not all motion is progress. Some of it is just sophisticated avoidance in disguise. Step 4. Feel what you've been running from. Stillness will bring things to the surface. Emotions you buried, truths you've avoided, grief you never grieved. Don't run this time. Let it rise. Sit with the sadness. Name the loneliness. Welcome the boredom. These are not flaws to fix. They're signals that something within you is ready to unthaw. The world told you to outrun those feelings. Stillness invites you to befriend them. And that act of befriending, it's the most radical kind of healing there is. Step 5. Choose slowness, intentionally. Slowness isn't laziness. Slowness is a stance. It's a spiritual decision to live deliberately instead of reactively. In a world addicted to speed, choosing slowness is revolutionary. It means saying no when everyone expects yes, taking longer walks, longer breaths, longer conversations, doing one thing at a time, on purpose, because slowness is how we reclaim our attention, and attention is the only currency that buys back our lives. Step 6. Rebuild your identity from the inside out. The final stage of the rebellion is this. You no longer define yourself by what you do. You define yourself by how deeply you can be present with what is. You stop asking, "Am I successful?" You start asking, "Am I here?" You stop performing. You start experiencing. That's the turning point. When stillness is no longer an interruption, but a homecoming. So here you are, on the edge of a life you no longer need to escape from. The world will still push you to move faster, to be louder, to achieve more. But you've remembered a deeper rhythm, one that doesn't demand, one that doesn't chase, one that doesn't shout, just a quiet knowing. You don't have to run anymore. And now, in that stillness, one final truth begins to reveal itself. A truth so simple and profound, it may just rewrite everything you thought you knew about purpose, peace, and what it means to be fully alive. Let's go there. There is a moment when the noise fades, the distractions fall away, and the masks slip. When something ancient stirs beneath the surface of your awareness. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it changes everything. Because in this moment of stillness, you realize something so simple, so unsettling, and so liberating that it leaves you breathless. Stillness was never empty. You were. And all this time, every sprint toward productivity, every obsession with optimization, every achievement performed for the applause of people who don't truly know you, it was all an attempt to outrun this single, terrifying truth. You didn't know how to be with yourself, not your curated self, not your strategic self, not your goal-oriented self-improving persona, but your actual, raw, unfiltered, unmeasured self. And now here it is, sitting with you in the quiet, not asking for anything, just waiting to be acknowledged. The stillness is you remembering. The ultimate truth is this: stillness is not something you visit. It's something you are. It's the ground beneath all the roles you play, the thoughts you think, the identities you craft. It is what remains when the stories fall away. It's the home you've been searching for in ambition, addiction, perfection, and never quite reaching. Because you can't achieve your way to inner peace. You have to stop long enough to remember it was always there. You were never lost, just distracted. The fear of stillness isn't about silence. It's about what silence reveals. And the revelation is this: you were never broken. You were just distracted by a world designed to keep you from yourself. A world that sells attention but never teaches presence. That praises output but shames rest. That mistakes constant motion for actual meaning. But stillness interrupts that spell. Stillness says, you are already enough. Even here. Even now. Even in the chaos. And that's why it's so terrifying, because once you know this truth, you can no longer live the same way. You can no longer chase what you no longer need. Peace is not found. It's remembered. We've been conditioned to believe that peace is the result of a journey, something you reach after fixing, earning, and striving. But peace isn't the destination. It's the space that opens up when you stop resisting your own presence. It's the softening of your inner war. It's the breath that doesn't try to become anything. It's the heart that doesn't need to prove itself to beat. Stillness is the medicine not because it cures you, but because it shows you you were never sick. You were simply moving too fast to feel whole. Stillness is a return, not a retreat. This isn't about disengaging from life. Stillness doesn't mean stepping away from responsibility or ambition. It means no longer letting those things define you. It means building your life from the inside out, not the outside in. It means letting your actions flow from clarity instead of fear. It means knowing the difference between meaningful motion and mindless movement. It means you can rest and still matter. You can pause and still belong. You can simply exist and still be worthy. That's the quiet revolution. And it begins inside you, the final paradox. Here at the end, you see the paradox clearly. What you were running from was never the stillness. It was your own aliveness, the part of you that feels, that longs, that remembers. Stillness doesn't take anything from you. It gives everything back, your attention, your truth, yourself. And once you've tasted that kind of peace, not as a concept, but as a living reality, you'll never chase noise the same way again. Because you'll know, stillness is not the absence of life. It's the presence of what makes life real. So now you have a choice. You can go back to the world as it was, fast, loud, performative. Or you can begin again, not with a goal, not with a plan, but with a pause, a breath, a moment of stillness so honest, so human, so sacred, that everything noisy in you finally goes quiet, not because you've won, but because you've remembered who you are, where peace lives, and that you were never meant to fear the quiet. You were meant to return to it.